Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. We've not heard from me for a considerable time. Anyway, so this video is about Trump's second impeachment, which it looks like is coming up. The Trump presidency has but 8 days left to run its very regrettable life. This bid to impeach him comes hard on the heels of that invasion of Congress by a pro-Trump mob who were vociferating that there was electoral fraud, there were these completely bogus allegations they were spewing out, calling Nancy Pelosi Satan and so on. Many of them carry guns, part of this deranged and pernicious conspiracy theory wacko group called QAnon, and on and on. It would be almost comical if it weren't so deadly serious. 5 people died as a result of that. A police officer was murdered by these Trumpsters. So Donald Trump had delivered an insightful speech only about an hour beforehand, and that led directly to the murder. And it's astonishing there just weren't more people killed. You'd think that some of the Trump mob might open fire, or the police officers might open fire preemptively if armed people rush in there patently bent on doing heavy violence. They'd be obliged to open fire. Some people said if BLM had done the same thing, the police would not have hesitated to open fire. Black people have been shot dead for doing far less, being unarmed in a public place, or even unarmed at home. And of course the Trump team completely speaks up for that, thinks that the murder of unarmed black people is entirely acceptable and no one should even get wrapped over the knuckles for doing that. It's incredible, the double standard here. So Trump has engaged in hate speech for decades. There was the notorious Central Park jogger case where he called for the execution of a number of children, ethnic minority children, who found not guilty, proven to be not guilty of beating up and raping a white woman. By DNA, it could not possibly have been them, and yet Trump still demanded their deaths. So his rhetoric has always been odious. He's advocates for violent crime again and again. He did so at his rallies in 2016, and grievous bodily harm was inflicted by Trump's fanatical admirers. Despite knowing this, he persisted in willfully inciting these crimes, and so many assaults took place at the express direction of Donald Trump. So he's long been an advocate for domestic terrorism. His inanity, his rascality, puerility, vulgarity, vanity, and barbarity are all plain to see. And I'm very glad to see the back of him. I sincerely hope never to hear the name Trump again after the 20th of January. Trouble is, I think it's unlikely. But his tub-thumping speech had causal potency in the murder which took place later. It was clearly an incitement to unlawful violence with a view to overthrow the government. Trump has lost and lost and lost. He's the biggest loser. He lost the popular vote. He lost, I think it was 26 states plus the District of Columbia. And he obviously lost in the Electoral College. And he lost almost every court case he had about this. And he lost in all these state legislatures, which I hope he wouldn't certify the results. He lost in the US Congress, which certified the results, and on and on and on. He is the biggest loser. You know, he could lose any number of times and still not accept it, and neither would some of his moronic, knuckle-dragging, hate-spewing supporters. And then we're told by some Republican commentators that these terrorists were patriots. Yeah, how did the other American patriots? Was it carrying the swastika? As well was it carrying the Confederate flag? And a traitoress was amongst those killed. The Confederacy, obviously the sworn enemy of the United States, and obviously the Confederate army officers were sometimes former US army officers who betrayed their pledge of allegiance to serve an enemy power. There were white supremacists among them. There were no non-whites there so far as I could tell. So Trump has long propagated zombie lies. And no matter how strongly they're disconfirmed, they will still be believed by some of his moronic admirers. The disproof could be absolutely irrefragable, and yet they would still subscribe to these bogus beliefs, claiming it was a rigged election. So it's a big lie theory. No matter how big the lie, well, the bigger the lie, in fact, the more people will believe it. So he'll just persist in saying that. He's got absolutely no common decency, could never fess up, could never admit he lost. Such a sore loser, such a crybaby. I remember many Republicans mocking Democrats in 2016, really gloating and goading them over the defeat of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, obviously a very deficient candidate. And much though I dislike her, she was at least an intelligent adult, and I favoured her over Donald J. So much for Donald Trump being a law and order president. And I saw the loathsome Stephen Crowder posting a video some months ago saying that Trump was kicking Biden's ass on law and order in the debates. A needlessly violent metaphor for someone who supposedly favours law and order. It was staggering, the chutzpah of it. It was nauseating to suggest that Trump, such a big criminal, is in favour of law and order. So inflammatory rhetoric from him led directly to this. Words lead to actions. Everybody knows that. And you'll know from common law, well, many of you, that if you order or encourage someone to commit a crime and they do so, then that's accessoryship. You have abetted that crime. You will also be held liable for the crime that you have helped to bring about. So a bit of plot to kill Nancy Pelosi for some time, people calling her Satan and so on. Fortunately, that they weren't killed. So the surprising thing is actually relatively few people were killed. It could have been far, far worse. Some people have slammed the police, the FBI, security at the US Capitol for not taking precipitate action. But would that have been heavy-handed? Would that have been premature? Maybe. They have a right to protest, okay, but they crossed the line. They broke in there. They trespassed there with guns. Would seem that they're hell-bent on murder. Now, obviously the public are allowed in the US Capitol, but they have to go in the right way. They have to queue up and wait their turn and be searched and all the rest of it. So there was a very hesitant denunciation from Donald Trump. There was equivocation on his part, and that's why the impeachment is upcoming. Is there any purpose in doing so when there are only 8 days remaining of his presidential term? And I'm glad he hasn't done something worse. I thought he might start a war, maybe even a nuclear war, bomb Iran. But no, so far he's been quite slothful. And when he's idling on his golf courses, cheating liberally, that's what I'm least concerned. So some Republicans vacillate about denouncing what he's done. There ought to be an unequivocal condemnation of his outrageous conduct. But it's been going on for years. Now, increasingly, they're washing their hands of him. They're acting as though they hardly knew him. It's Trump's tactic. Whenever any of his consigliere was sent to prison for various felonies, he said, "Oh, I hardly know the guy," despite there being ample video evidence that he knew the person very well indeed. So, I mean, if Trump is removed, and I think it's improbable, then Pence would be president for about a week. Is that an improvement? Well, not much. I mean, Pence is maybe more calculating, even more cynical, less deranged, I would say, possibly less dangerous. But he could pardon Trump. Trump's about talking about pardoning himself, and apparently that's illegal. I don't actually know. You'd have to listen to some professor on jurisprudence, and I've not studied United States federal law. But Trump ends his presidency in ignominy as he began it, and it's uniquely ignominious insofar as he's the only person to be impeached twice, but looks like not removed from office. Increasingly crestfallen, the oxygen of publicity has been cut off. Twitter and Facebook abandoned him. That's obviously long overdue. I can see why they didn't, because they thought he is the President of the United States. Even they may detest him, even if he breaks the House rules, he's still a very puissant person, and they have to give him a platform. But they've now said, no, we don't, because what he's done has led directly to a murder. So I think there'll never be another Trump. They broke the mold when he was born. He is as though all the nation's vices are incarnate in one man. He's just unutterably noisome and despicable. Anyway, I don't think that the Democrats are going to get the votes again. Yeah, they're getting the House of Representatives, which they already control, and probably a few Republicans will vote for him this time. Out of common decency, not so much. Maybe a few, but I think more desperately trying to be rats off the sinking ship, as in want to dissociate with themselves from his toxic legacy. The staggering thing is he lost by only 4.5% of the vote, and he got more votes this time than last time. Almost everybody who voted from the first time voted from a second time, despite seeing what he was like. But in the unique 2/3 of the House of the Senate, and okay, all the Democrats will vote against him. A handful of Republicans, I would think, Mitt Romney again, but I just don't see it getting 2/3. It's never happened in American history. I know what Trump has done has been unprecedented in a bad way, just time after time. So, what lesson will Republicans draw from this? Maybe to choose someone blander, someone safer. They can also say that Trump did galvanize the base, or people who were politically disengaged in the way that others didn't before, disaffected Democrats, blue collar workers who were struggling. So they may want to find someone who can somehow reach this untapped reservoir of votes like Trump could, without turning off middle of the road opinions so much, without being so disgraceful. It might be the last hurrah of white nationalism, this Trump presidency. I'm not saying white nationalism is going to vanish, but I think diminish. It shan't die, but it won't be as powerful a force as it was. So it'd be great to never hear from him. I think he'll be the Banquo's ghost of the next Republican convention. He'll always be sniping at the sidelines from President Biden or whoever. If I was in charge, it was much better. When I was in charge, it was much better. He's got no decorum. He carries himself without any gravitas. So other Republican or other previous presidents, they've been fairly reticent, and that's been apposite and becoming. But Trump has always made such a display of himself in such an unseemly fashion. I don't see how he's going to change from his conduct from the way it's been heretofore. So that's the end of Trump. And there's no reason for him to have such a megaphone in future. A lot of his followers have switched over to Telegram, which happily provides a forum for racists and apparently paedophiles as well to disseminate their thoughts, their desires, their plans. I'm not even sure about images. Surprised that's not blocked. If that's the case, it's encrypted. But there's some money in allowing Trumpist rhetoric to be bandied about. So Twitter and Facebook, they might relent, saying, "Oh, we're missing out on the revenue stream, and as it's not working, Telegram's doing it. Well, let them allow him back." And I hope they don't, for some ethical reasons. And yes, they can switch to Telegram, but that's got less reach. And you want to make it more difficult for Trumpists, not easier. I suppose this leads on to a separate debate about these social media platforms. Are they simply providing a platform, or are they publishing? Because if they edit things, if they issue warnings, if they ban certain things, that suggest that they are publishing and not simply providing you with an aperture through which to force your discourse. Well, that's enough from me. Please follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Got to get Instagramming. Might even get onto TikTok. Book online lessons with me in history, politics, religious studies, citizenship, geography, French, law, things of that nature. I'll be a tour guide in London whenever tourism reopens in a century or two. And I edit all sorts of documents. I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Russian, and Romanian. Okay, toodaloo.